Hello everyone, this is Tom Uren. I'm here for another Between Two Nerds discussion with the Grugq. G'day Grugq, how are you?
G'day Tom, fine, and yourself?
I'm well. This week's episode is brought to you by DropZone AI. They automate all the mundane stuff that Tier 1 SOC analysts have to do so that the analysts can focus on more interesting and more important stuff. Find them at dropzone.ai. So, Grugq, I've been thinking about scam compounds, so-called pig butchering compounds, and there was another Uren report this week that I wrote about. So it turns out that these compounds generate like billions of dollars. So one of the sort of asides in the report was that some people who were involved in these compounds were done for money laundering in Singapore. 10 of them, they were Chinese nationals originally, but now have citizenships all over the world. And they seized $2 billion worth of assets from these 10 people. And it's because they were convicted for sort of somewhat mundane money laundering crimes. I think the biggest jail sentence one of them got was like 18 months. If you get caught for 18 months and you've got hundreds of millions of dollars, and they had assets all over the world. That's
right.
Like, well,
so it's not.
Why would you ever stop? And so what I've been thinking about is I've advocated, and I think you also believe, that ransomware criminals were good targets for offensive cyber operations, for good targets for places like Cyber Command, ASD, the UK's Cyber Force. Like that made sense to target those organisations. So the question today we're going to address is, does it make sense for those kinds of offensive cyber organizations to tackle these kind of scam compound syndicates? And so just to sketch out, there's like some pretty significant differences between the two. So the scam compounds, they are highly organized. They take people from pretty much all over the world, many different countries. They take them to these compounds either forcibly on false pretense or on false pretenses, and then they basically enslave them. So they become forced labor. Some of the compounds have tens of thousands of people. They think that there's hundreds of thousands involved, and they do online scams. So romance scams, cryptocurrency investment scams, illegal gambling, and it's like just tremendously lucrative. So it's not clear from the reports what the management or organizational structure is, I guess. But there's got to be one. Like there's got to be a massive organization behind it.
Right.
So that's and around these organizations have grown up money laundering, I guess,
sort of
an
ecosystem of support infrastructure.
Yeah. And it's I think because they've got so much money, it attracts other criminal enterprise to do whatever they need to do. So that's the sort of thumbnail sketch of what we're talking about. And the one reason it's particularly concerning is that they're starting to push out into different parts of the world. So they've been located in areas like Myanmar or Cambodia, where often on border areas where there's poor governance. And so the neighbouring states, China, Thailand, Philippines is also involved, have started to push back very significantly because it's like a serious problem. And so the good news is they're being forced to adapt.
I mean, one of the things over here, they have stopped selling electricity to some of the compounds. Right. So it's sort of taking away one of their centers of gravity that they need in order to function.
Thailand's also done things like cut internet access.
Yep.
And so the compounds have adapted by using Starlink, but they're also moving geographically and moving into
when you have billions, then
businesses.
Once you've got billions, I think that these things are minor inconveniences as opposed to sort of like fatal catastrophes that just existentially destroy the business.
That's right. you're sitting on $1 billion, like, oh no, my internet access has been cut.
Send everyone home. That's it.
So I guess the first question is, like, for somewhere like Cyber Command or ASD to get involved, we would have to think that it's a national security threat, a big problem.
Yeah. So I think, it isn't right now, but it's certainly national security threat adjacent, right? It's so they partner, and they're starting to work with criminal organizations that are national security threats.
Yeah. So one of the things in the report, you remind me, is that the Chinese money laundering organizations are now working with Mexican cartels. And so they're both apparently cheaper and harder to disrupt.
All of the white-collar jobs are being offshore. At first they took the manufacturing. Now they're taking the good white-collar crime. Right. When will it end? China is getting...
These were like good, well-paying white-collar crime jobs. What we need is tariffs.
There we go. 125% on all Chinese money laundering. That's
so the report says that they would charge from 0 to 6%. And they have... So, yeah, 125% on 0% is not very much. But they also use a whole swath of different techniques. So it's harder to track as well.
Right.
But yeah, so it's directly related to something that is, I think, a pretty serious threat.
And I mean, I'd sort of related a bit to the BEC stuff, right? The business email compromise, where it's sort of like, it starts out as the sort of, they're scamming people, and that's not great, but it's not a threat. And then it's like, well, they're scamming quite a lot of people, and this is a bit more of an issue. And then it's like, they're scamming people, and now they're partnering with the Italian mafia and teaching them how to do it, and like trading tips on different sorts of crime industries that you can get into. And it feels a little bit like a tumor in a way, where you're like, well, it's not big enough to worry about yet, so I'll just wait. Like it doesn't seem like that's the best approach of dealing with this. Like you don't go like, well, it's not a threat at this point in time, so let's just wait until it's bigger and harder to deal with, and then we can tackle it.
That's right. So you're arguing a kind of prevention is better than cure perspective.
Yeah, which, I know that's not a popular opinion in the strategy, in the national security space. Like, strategically, no one likes to do that. But yeah, I don't think that allowing these people to accumulate billions and billions of dollars is going to make them less of a threat going forward. Okay.
So I guess in contrast to ransomware, say, ransomware, you justify it because of things like, I guess in the US, Colonial Pipeline, where ransomware disrupted a gas pipeline, it's disrupted hospitals, it disrupted that healthcare organization, was it United Health?
Yep.
Like, these have all had pretty significant systemic disruption.
It's sort of... So I don't know if I'd classify scam organizations as cyber organizations. Like, they're certainly cyber criminals, but I don't know if they're cyber organizations. So, like, obviously, I think the difference here is that ransomware as a cyber organization poses a cyber threat, and that, as we said, like, there's a lot of systems that rely on cyber, and these guys get into them and disrupt them. So that can be a national security issue because of what they're targeting. Whereas I think that these, like the pig butchering scams and the BEC guys, they're not doing the same sorts of criminal activity. They're not disrupting these systems. They're just stealing money. I mean, but
yep. Well, I guess if you steal a lot of money from someone, like their life savings, which happens all the time, it's not a national security threat. It's easy to ignore it. But I think you're arguing that because the syndicates themselves are so bad, so corrupting, its impacts are because criminals have so much money, rather than because it's taking individually significant but nationally insignificant amounts of money from individuals.
Yeah, and I think that there's, around the edges, as you were saying, I think that around the edges, it starts introducing corruption into things. So banks initially are very against being used for money laundering until there's huge amounts of money involved, at which point they're like, well, I mean, what is money laundering anyway, if you think about it? And then, so you get like the HSBC in Mexico, where they had a special teller window that had the size of the suitcases of money that were being brought in. So they had a special window for drug money deposits. Right. So like they knew what they were doing, but they were also making millions of dollars doing it. So they were kind of okay with it. And I think that starts to happen when you have, this much money being taken through banks. It's just, and that spreads, and it's just fundamentally corrosive and bad. Like you don't want that. So
it's the end result of the scam rather than the damage that the scam results in. So I guess it's the opposite for ransomware, right? It's the problem is the crime, not the money. In this case, the problem is the money, not the crime.
Right.
Okay, so
from a national security perspective, because we're not dismissing the pain of the victims, obviously, but from a national security point of view,
yes, exactly, it's just to be clear, it's a horrendous thing that's going on. I don't like it at all. So I buy that argument that it will be a huge problem. I don't know that it will gain traction, but anyway, let's move on.
So if we assume, for the sake of argument, that it is a national security threat and it should be tackled in some way, is cyber the way to tackle it?
Yep. Okay. So I drew a thumbnail picture of these organizations. In a ransomware context, it seems very clear to me that it is a good idea because... Right. And there was a couple of reasons for that. For me personally, one of them was that there's a small number of ransomware groups that cause most of the harm. So it's like you target those ransomware groups. They also had relatively few players, so they were quite centralized, and it seemed like you would be able to find a point of leverage that you could, with a relatively small team, actually make a significant difference. Like there were clear vulnerabilities that even like, me sitting in my office back home can say, yes, these must exist. To me, it's not clear at all that these vulnerabilities exist in organizations which are big enough to have, control tens of thousands of people
or whatever. Yeah. So I think one of the differences, ignoring the cyber stuff for a minute, just from the personnel perspective, I think one of the differences is that when you're looking at ransomware, like these are cyber criminals, like they're cyber first, and they're criminals because they're doing cyber crimes, right? But they're like Joe Schmoes or Ivans or whatever. They're normal people who happen to be generating huge amounts of money with this particularly lucrative illegal thing that they do. Whereas I think with the syndicates, you're looking at criminal organizations where they're individually powerful on their own, who have adopted this as a way to make money. Like they've discovered a new scam. So they might have been, normally they'd be bankrolling, robbing banks or whatever, or various different loan sharking or something. Here's just another thing that they're investing in that generates money. So I think that the people behind it, who are ultimately behind it, probably don't even have phones. I don't think that they're particularly embedded into a digital culture. I don't think they're particularly exposed. So I don't even know if you could go after them in that way.
Right. I guess one thing about ransomware groups is that they would often talk anonymously. So there was, over secure messaging services, secure in the sense that all the messages would get leaked every few years, but otherwise secure.
Yeah.
Secure-ish. I imagine in these scam syndicates, they're real face-to-face people. They're not.
Yeah.
There's one avenue that's cut out.
And I strongly suspect that a lot of these guys started with like running casinos, but like these are like mobbed up casinos, like the old school ones, not the new corporate ones. And so there's very much smoke-filled room, lots of alcohol or lots of tea or whatever it is, face-to-face discussions. I don't think they're particularly technical, and I don't think they would trust that stuff anyway, just because they're not technical. Right. So like I think that the in a way the fundamental difference is because the ransomware people understand encryption, they will trust that encryption secures them because that's what encryption does. Right. Yeah. Right. So when they get betrayed and someone leaks everything, they're shocked because that's not part of their threat model. They don't think about that. Whereas these other guys just don't trust computers because they're newfangled gimmicks that the kids understand, but not for these guys. So they're just not going to believe that they're secure, regardless of encryption or whatever. Like that's just fundamentally going to be a thing. So I think the actual powerful players within these environments, where you've got like your ransomware operators versus your syndicates, like the syndicate guys are just straightforward criminals who are doing this thing. I don't think that they're exposed. I don't think they're dependent on cyber. So you'd have to go after the scam itself, not after the people.
Right.
Right. So like the scam itself might be what's exposed to cyber, because that does rely on cyber, if that makes sense. Right. So it's that the scam that they're conducting is cyber exposed and they aren't, or it's possibly cyber exposed, whereas ransomware, the group is dependent on cyber. So all of them are exposed.
Right. Okay. So something similar that comes to mind is the Internet Research Agency, where there was basically a building full of people in St. Petersburg who were putting out misinformation or disinformation because it was deliberate.
Right.
And what Cyber Command did, it seems like, is that they disrupted their internet access for a day or so. So that's the answer, is it, Grugq?
There we go. DDoS. All we need to, booters need to be on the payroll for Cybercom, and we can solve this with DDoS, just like all of life's problems.
Well, what I was getting at is the Thais cut their internet access. One of the plan Bs they adopted was to use Starlink instead. Right. And it seems like if Thailand can cut internet access, then surely Starlink can cut their internet access as well.
Ooh,
right?
Yeah.
To particular compounds. Like, surely this has got to be a thing you can do, because if someone doesn't pay their bill, you're going to cut them off, right? So you've got to be able to cut off by terminal. And like the nature of a satellite communications company is where the terminals are.
And you're probably going to notice that there's 50 terminals doing huge amounts of traffic only to WhatsApp in this one very, very small part of the jungle. It's going to be a little bit sus. Yeah.
So that doesn't sound to me like a Cyber Command thing. That sounds to me like we should lean on Starlink to do something about it thing. It also seems that for a lot of what they're doing, they're talking basically on messaging apps. And maybe the messaging app is the place.
If we put in back doors so that the encryption is going to... Just, we got to get rid of these spaces where criminals can be safe from law enforcement observation. That's what we have to do. And because they're using these encrypted criminal encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp or Telegram or Facebook Messenger, these are the things that are obviously the real problem, and those need to be addressed with just a comprehensive backdoor added for lawful access. And boom, done.
So there was the phrase I heard about that is that the ghetto of the internet, We don't want these spaces to become the ghetto of the internet. Which I think was, I quite liked it as a turn of phrase. It was quite colourful. So one of the things WhatsApp does is it collects metadata. Mm-hmm. And it seems like you could use that to try and figure out, like, just patterns. Like a scam compound's got to have a particularly unique signature, right? As a pattern that would be...
It's a fixed location with huge amounts of traffic. And I think that what will help is you're not completely blind, because you're going to have some number of victims will come forward to the FBI or other law enforcement and say, I've been scammed, like this thing happened to me. And the FBI can say, how were you contacted? Let's look at the messages. And it will give you pointers of where to look. And then you could say, oh, and this, like 50 square meters around this area, there's 20,000 WhatsApp sessions going constantly from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. every day, and then none overnight. Well, it's probably just some teenagers or something, right?
I actually suspect that some of those companies already do stuff relating to that already. It's not clear how much.
They have visibility. They know what's going on. They might not know, but they definitely suspect. Like when there's a huge amount of registrations that start coming in, like because there has to be some sort of management of these these resources, and it's got to be done systematically, not necessarily automated, but in bulk. And as you said, like it has to stand out. Like when there's someone registering, 50 accounts in an hour from the exact same spot with like the same IP address. I find it very hard to believe that Facebook, who knows, the color of your underwear, doesn't know these scam call centers.
Yeah. So I think that they probably, a lot of companies do things, but that again feels like if we want them to do more, that's encouraging companies to do more or requiring them to do more rather than a cyber command thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're getting at maybe the crux of the issue, which is that I would argue that these are cyber organizations to a degree, simply because of how reliant they are on cyber stuff. But because they are not using any boutique or tailored cyber infrastructure, they're only using existing services, right? Like Gmail, like WhatsApp, like these things that are services that are provided by companies that provide legitimate services for the most part. Obviously they rely on money laundering and stuff like that, but generally speaking, their bread and butter here is
consumer services.
Like that's where they're vulnerable. You should be able to get them through that. That seems to me like Cyber Command can go after custom cyber infrastructure used by ransomware groups. Like that's ideal for their sort of thing. Like that's exactly what you want them doing. Like I'm not sure that they have much to say when it comes to the ways that these scam compounds are exposed to cyber, right? Like they they have a lot of phones, or they have a bunch of tablets.
Yep.
They don't really have something that you can go after in the same way.
Yeah, it seems to me that the leadership of these kind of syndicates would be a valid intelligence target. And maybe that might get you something that would be useful to enable some sort of other action.
So I bet you that the middle management tier of these sort of, at the very bottom you've got, your thugs and enforcers and whatever, and they absolutely are going to be posting Instagram stories of them beating people up or whatever it is. But as intelligence targets, they're not going to be very interesting because they don't know anything. But I think that the people who manage them and who manage them, sort of like their boss's boss, is where you're going to get people who are still like internet savvy. They will have Facebook profiles. They'll have Instagram. They'll have, they'll watch a lot of TikTok. They'll be normal people who do crime. And I think that they would be interesting intelligence targets because they doubtless speak a lot to each other about what's going on, have a lot of insight, and also speak to the upper management and such. So I think that's probably where you'd want to, you might have to get to them through the goons, but I think there's a lot of information there. What you do with it is the next thing.
I mean, I think the information you would use it to inform law enforcement action and gradually get stuff done there. So at this point, it's, yes, we think there would be a valid target, but it's hard to think of anything that would be particularly useful to do, just because these organizations are so different from ransomware groups, which are in a way like the perfect target for offensive cyber operations.
They're non-state threat actors, so there's no state escalation worries that you have, but they operate exactly like a state in many ways. So they're really, like, if you have a state capability designed to go after states, like Cybercom, setting it after a non-state capability, a non-state actor that happens to mimic a state in pretty much every way, that's your ideal scenario. You sort of couldn't pick a better target. Whereas I think it's like the FBI when they were going after Al Qaeda in 2001, and they kept trying to find, who is the number one, who is the number two, who are the deputies, who run the branch offices, and that's just not how Al Qaeda worked. Like, the FBI was just not capable at that point in time of going after a network. Then you had they went after the mafia. The mafia looks exactly like the FBI. They've got a boss, they've got sub-bosses, they've got, frontline operators. Like, all of that made sense to them. But then when you go after, there's one guy and then everyone kind of discusses and decides on things and they do it. Like, that just didn't make sense to them. And I think that's, in a way, that's a similar issue with these scam centers, is they don't make sense as threat actors. Right?
Okay, so how about some of the supporting infrastructure? Is there anywhere else, some of the services they rely on? Could you go after the money launderers, for example?
So I think that the money launderers are a lot more exposed because they have to do cyber as well. So they're going to be using encrypted apps in the same way. But I think because they interface with the real world through banks, and I think that the banks have an incentive not to support them, or at least can be very easily incentivized to, go after them. I think that there's a good opportunity there for intelligence collection via cyber, where if you can see what these guys are doing. Like, if they say, $100,000 is going to come into account X, and we're going to transfer it to, these other accounts to get it out. If you have that information and you can coordinate rapidly enough, I think that the intelligence collection via cyber there could be good. But then I don't know about the execution at the other end. Like, it feels like they're vulnerable to cyber collection in a way that makes them institutionally vulnerable. Like, the foundation of what they do is going to be vulnerable. But I don't know if anywhere has the capability of exploiting that vulnerability.
Yeah. So, I mean, in ransomware, again, going back to ransomware, the US government in particular has sanctioned, I guess, rogue exchanges, cryptocurrency exchanges that facilitate, illicit funds transfers. It seems like the Trump administration is a bit less keen on that, or a bit more pro-crypto, so I don't know whether we'll see that going forward. To me, it makes sense. If it's a criminal enterprise, you should just sanction it. But
certainly,
it seems like some of the money laundering are setting up their own exchanges, so that's possibly something that will happen. Again, it doesn't seem like you need a cyber command action to do that.
Yeah.
The intelligence may lead you to do the sanctioning, but and also it seems to me like there would be a reluctance to actually conduct an operation to mess with the financial system. Like North Korea does it all the time, of course.
This is exactly what I was thinking, is like, a cyber command doesn't have what it takes, but you know who does?
I mean, that actually does seem like an opportunity for North Korea. I think you're right there. Like,
absolutely, like they could deal with that pariah status and get access to billions of dollars.
It's a win-win situation. A win for them and a win for us.
Well, it's half a loss for us.
Yeah, so I guess where I was starting with that was that it seems like to me that would be a bridge too far for a responsible government, like in terms of we don't want to, and the rationale is we don't want to upset faith in the financial system. Hacking to disrupt it is bad. It seems to me that it would take quite you'd read a really, 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 really good reason to do that.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Like the loss of trust and faith in the international financial system would be so big that it's hard to imagine a scenario where it be a worthwhile trade-off. And, a few $1 billion in scams is absolutely not it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think Lazarus, again, they're very, like North Korea is very well positioned here because if they act against the banks, that's a Tuesday. Whereas if, they're not going to disrupt trust in the same way. Like they're not going to have the same sort of impact. I very much think that, this is worth exploring. Maybe the way to go about doing it is just to write up some ideas and then leave it out with a crypto wallet and let them, figure it out on their own. Just drop some hints.
Yeah. So to me, there's this sense that
here we go. I've got an idea. The next time you're doing an interview for someone for an IT role, just mention this as one of your questions, and I'm sure it will get back to the North Koreans very rapidly. Right? Here's your coding challenge. You have to hack into a bank that's doing money laundering so you can access the billions of dollars in scam cash.
So I think that some of the laundering occurs through cryptocurrency exchanges. And I guess a lot of the money that North Korea has stolen has been in cryptocurrency, which feels adjacent to the real financial system in the sense that you can steal hundreds of millions or billions of dollars and people are like, whatever.
Yeah.
And so maybe I guess cryptocurrency thefts would be like fine.
Yeah. So when they went after the Bangladesh central bank, like that didn't destroy faith in the international banking system. The fact that they did this hack and almost got all this money, like that didn't make anyone go, oh my God, banks can't be trusted. Like it strikes me that if anyone has the capability of gaining access to these money laundering gangs, monitoring their communications, and then intercepting their transfers, like Lazarus is nimble enough to do that. So like with the Bybit hack, that recent hack where they stole just massive amounts of money, like this very complicated chain of exploits to get to where they were. And then they were only exposing the actual exploit that they were using for a few minutes. Like as soon as it had executed and done its thing, they got rid of it. Like, I think that they're very fast. I think that they have the coordination, and I think that they'd be motivated. I think that they have the authorities internally. Like, they won't have to go to... I think getting approval would not be that difficult for them. Yeah.
Right. So at this point...
Like, I don't know if that's a Title 10 or a Title 50 under their...
So at this point, it's yes, scam syndicates are a national security threat. No, they're no good for Western or Five Eyes cybersecurity agencies. But yes, we fully endorse North Korea going after them.
Yeah, I mean, because we could steal money from the crime syndicates and give it to the nuclear-armed state. That's
okay, yeah.
That's how we reduce national security risk. That's how you get rid of exposure. It's
yeah, okay. Rethinking that one now, I guess.
There might be one or two downsides, but generally speaking,
it's a win for cyber. It's not a win for nuclear proliferation.
It's a trade-off I'm willing to make. Cyber Uber alles.
Thanks a lot, Grugq.
Thanks a lot, Tom.